High in the Pacific Northwest, where the rails climb past timberline and disappear into fog, a railroad bridge stretches 200 feet across a canyon. No map remembers. The wind moves through its old timbers. The river breathes far below. Then between two cross beams a flicker, a panel of dark iron, a hinge, a hatch nobody was ever meant to find. Halfway across the trestle, a young man lies flat against the wet ties. 21 years old, soaked to the bone, his hand on a brass key that does not belong to him. Somewhere behind him in the trees on the canyon rim, a single boot print presses into the morning dew. The print is fresh. He has not been alone for a long time. The first thing Owen Hartley remembered was the smell of pipe tobacco and wet wool. October 1981. He was 8 years old. His father knelt by the bed. The lamp on the nightstand burned low. The wick smoked a little. Outside, the rain hit the tin roof of their small house on Mercer Street, the way rain always hit that roof. Like applause. Like something far away clapping for a show nobody else could see. His father smelled like the wood shop, like the rail yard, like a man who had been somewhere cold and was now warm and tired. Owen. Yes, sir. Listen to me. Okay. His father's hand on his forehead. Heavy, steady, the way a hand feels when it's about to lift away forever. If one day you go looking for me, if one day you have to. Daddy. Hush. If one day you do. The rain kept clapping. You follow the rails that aren't on any map. Owen didn't understand. Owen was 8. He understood breakfast cereal and the names of the engines in his picture book. He understood the way his father's beard scratched when he kissed him goodnight. He didn't understand rails that weren't on maps. But he nodded, because his father's eyes were doing a thing Owen had never seen them do. His father's eyes were leaving the room a little, going somewhere ahead. Promise me. I promise. Good boy. His father bent down, kissed his forehead. The beard scratched, the lamp guttered, the rain clapped. And in the morning, his father was gone. Not gone for the day, not gone for the week. Gone the way a sentence ends when the writer gives up halfway through. That was 13 years ago. 13 years was a long time to carry a single sentence inside you like a stone in your pocket. Long enough to forget the shape of it. Almost. Except Owen Hartley never forgot anything. The sawmill in Belden ran 6 days a week, and on the 7th day it sat quiet in the cold mountain air and dreamed of running. Owen worked the green chain, hardest job in the place. You stood at the end of the conveyor, and you grabbed the boards as they came off the saw, and you sorted them by length, by grade, by whether they were going to be somebody's porch or somebody's coffin. He was good at it. He was 21 and he had hands like a man twice his age. Calloused, sure. The kind of hands that didn't fumble. The other men called him Quiet Owen. He didn't mind. It wasn't unkind. It was just true. He'd been working the green chain for 6 months. Before that, it was a feed store in Cle Elum. Before that, a roofing crew outside Wenatchee. Before that. Owen had a map in his head of every small town he'd worked in since he turned 17 and left his mother's house with one duffel bag and his father's old hunting knife. He had not gone back. He had not called. He thought about her sometimes. His mother, Margaret. He thought about her the way you think about a country you used to live in but can't quite remember the language of. The library in Belden was closing. Budget cuts. Most of the books were going into boxes marked surplus. The rest were going into the dumpster behind the building. Owen passed the dumpster every Tuesday on his way to the laundromat. That Tuesday in May of 1994, something in the dumpster caught his eye. A roll of paper, yellowed at the edges, tied with twine. He didn't know why he stopped. He just stopped. Because something in his chest did a thing it hadn't done in years. It tightened. He reached in, past the discarded encyclopedias, past the smell of old paste and damp cardboard. He worked the roll free. He stood in the alley behind the library with the roll in his hands. His breath made small clouds in the spring morning air. He untied the twine. The paper opened with the slow reluctance of a thing that has been folded for a very long time. It was a survey chart, dated 1947. The Pacific Northwest, the high country, roads, rivers, the thin pencil scratches that meant railroad lines, some active, some abandoned. Owen's eyes moved across the chart the way a man's eyes move across a face he hasn't seen since childhood. Slowly, then all at once. Because there, in the upper right corner, a line, a spur. It ran east from the main road, through the mountains, and then it stopped. The way a sentence stops when the writer gives up. Beside the line in faded pencil, 4 words. Cutter past spur. Owen Hartley stopped breathing. Because Cutter was his grandfather's middle name, William Cutter Hartley. He had never met the man, but his father had spoken the name once, only once, in the kitchen, to his mother, when they thought Owen was asleep. Owen had been 7. He remembered the way his father said it, like a secret, like a door. He stood in the alley and the rain started up again, soft this time. Spring rain, patient rain, the kind that doesn't try to convince you of anything. He rolled the chart back up, slowly. His hands were not steady. He told himself it was the cold. It wasn't the cold. The Belden Public Library had a back room they used for storage. The librarian who used to run the place had retired in 1989. Her name had been Eleanor Whitfield. Everyone in town still talked about her. The way people in small towns talk about the woman who knew everything. Owen asked at the front desk. The girl behind the counter was 20 maybe. She was reading a paperback with a man on the cover with no shirt. Eleanor Whitfield, does she still live in town? The girl looked up, chewed her gum, looked at him a long second. Lives out on Pine Hollow Road, Yellow House, end of the gravel. Thank you. You family. Owen paused. No. The girl shrugged, went back to her book. Owen walked. It was 3 miles to Pine Hollow Road. He didn't have a car. He had never had a car. He walked the way some men ride, like it was the natural state of being alive. The yellow house sat at the end of a long gravel drive, the kind of house a woman keeps when she has decided she doesn't need much. 2 windows in front, a porch, a wood stove chimney leaking a thin gray line into the pale spring sky. He knocked. She opened the door before his knuckles left the wood. She was small, smaller than he expected, 70 years old and built like a bird that had outlived 3 generations of cats. Her eyes were gray. Her hair was the white of clean snow. She looked at him, and her face did a thing. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, oh, just that. Oh. Owen swallowed. Ma'am, my name is Owen Hartley. I was wondering if I could ask you about a map I found. She didn't move. Her eyes were doing something, tracking his face, searching it, like she was looking at one face and seeing another. Come in. Ma'am? Come in, son, you'll catch your death. He stepped through the door. The house smelled like cedar and bread and something else. Something old, like paper that had been loved. She closed the door behind him. She did not invite him to sit. She stood in front of him in the small entryway, and she put her hand, slowly, like she was reaching for something that might break. She put her hand on his cheek. He went still. You have his eyes. Ma'am, not your father's. His chest did the thing again. Your grandfather's. The kitchen was warm. She put a kettle on the stove. She moved the way old women move who have decided not to apologize for it. Slowly, surely, with the dignity of a woman who has earned every minute of every year. She did not ask if he wanted tea. She made tea. She put a mug in front of him. He sat at her small table, and the chart was rolled on the wood between them, and his hands were not steady, and he was trying to make them be steady. Where did you find it? In a dumpster, behind the library. She closed her eyes. She nodded once. That'll be the new librarian's doing. Throws out anything older than her father. You knew him. Knew who, son? My grandfather, William Hartley. She opened her eyes. She looked at him. A long look. I knew him. How? That's not the question you came here to ask. It isn't. No. Owen put both hands around the mug. The mug was hot. His hands needed something hot. What is the question? You tell me. He looked at her. She waited. She had the patience of a woman who had spent 40 years waiting for the right book to be returned. My father. Yes. He left when I was 8. I know. You know. Owen, son, there isn't much I don't know about this valley. He told me, the night before, he told me to follow the rails that weren't on any map. She did not speak. She looked at him, and her gray eyes were wet now. She reached across the table. She took his hand. Her hand was cool, light, the hand of a bird. Then you'd better go follow them. Ma'am, I don't know where they go. Yes, you do. I don't. Owen Hartley. Yes. You have a map. You have your grandfather's name on it. You have your father's voice in your head telling you what to do. What part of that doesn't tell you where to go? He stared at her. Because she was right, and because something in him had known since the moment he opened that roll of paper in the alley. He had known. He had just been afraid to know. She stood, slowly. She crossed to a small wooden box on the windowsill. She opened it. She took out a key. The key was brass, the kind of brass that had been touched by 1,000 hands over 100 years, dark in the grooves, bright on the edges where it had been used. She came back to the table. She put the key in front of him. What is it for? You'll know when you see it. Mrs. Whitfield. Eleanor. Eleanor, please, what is this? What did my grandfather do? She looked at him a long time. Then she said, he kept things. Things. People. What do you mean? She picked up the chart. She unrolled it on the table. She put her finger on the thin pencil line that said Cutter Pass Spur. Your grandfather built something up there in 1959. Your father continued it, and then your father had to leave it. And nobody has been up there in 13 years. Not since the night before he came home and kissed you goodnight. What is it? It's not mine to tell. Eleanor. Owen, listen to me. If you go up there, you will find what you find, and you will understand things you don't understand right now. And some of those things will hurt. Do you hear me? I hear you. Some of those things will hurt very much. I hear you. She closed her eyes again. She squeezed his hand. She let it go. There is a trestle bridge, about 2 days' walk from the trailhead at Belden Creek, where the old grade leaves the river and starts climbing. You'll see it on the map. You can't miss it. When you get there, when you get to the bridge, she paused. You stop. You look. You think about what your father told you, and then you decide if you want to keep going. And if I do, then you keep going. And the key. You'll know. He left her house at dusk. The rain had stopped. The sky was that particular gray that means the cold is leaving for real now. May was the kind of month in these mountains that promised summer but did not yet deliver. She stood in the doorway as he walked away down the gravel drive. He turned at the road. She was still there. She raised one hand. He raised his. He walked into town with the chart under his coat and the key in his pocket, and a thing in his chest he didn't have a word for. The thing felt like both endings and beginnings at once. He spent the night in the room he rented above the hardware store. He sat at the small desk by the window. He laid out everything he owned. The chart, the key, his father's hunting knife, the handle wrapped in leather his father had wrapped himself, a folding map of the county, a compass, a notebook he had been writing in for 4 years, his sleeping bag, A canvas pack he had reinforced himself with salvaged leather strapping. He stood up. He went to the window. The town of Belden was small and lit and finite. He thought about his mother. He thought about her face the morning his father didn't come home. He thought about the way she had not cried. That had been the strangest thing. The thing that had broken something in him as a child without him understanding it was broken. She had not cried. She had stood at the kitchen sink and washed the same plate 3 times and looked out the window and not cried. He had thought. At 8 years old, he had thought. She doesn't love him. He had thought that. And it had lived in him like a splinter you can't get to, like something just under the skin, for 13 years. Now, standing at the window above the hardware store, he thought, or maybe she knew something I didn't. Maybe she knew she had to not cry. For some reason, I am about to find out. He weighed his pack on the postal scale at the feed store the next morning. 41 pounds. He liked knowing the weight of things. He liked knowing the weight of everything. He paid his rent through the end of the month. He bought 3 days of food, hardtack, jerky, coffee, a small tin of beans. He bought matches in a waxed paper sleeve. He filled his canteen. He left town on foot at first light. The trail up from Belden Creek climbed steady through second-growth fir, the kind of forest that grows back 50 years after a logging crew has been through. Tall now, thick. The light came down green and slow. The grade was the giveaway. A railroad grade never lies. The slope was perfect, steady, never steeper than 2%. He could feel it under his boots. The way the ground bent itself to accommodate the work of men who had been dead for 60 years. His grandfather had walked here. He kept walking. He climbed all morning. The trees thinned. The air got harder. By noon, he was above the timberline that ran up the south face into the granite scree where the original graders had blasted their way through the shoulder of the mountain. He could read the old work in the landscape the way some people read books, the gentle curves that avoided hard turns, the shallow cuts through ridge spurs where patient men with dynamite and hand drills had coaxed the mountain into cooperation. Someone had built this line with patience and real craft, and then the world had simply forgotten it. He was 21 years old and he understood that feeling intimately. He stopped to eat at midday, sat on a stump that had been a tree when his grandfather walked here. He ate jerky and drank water from his canteen. He looked back down the way he had come. The valley was small from up here. The valley was already very far away. He started walking again. And then, 2 hours later, he saw the boot print. It was in the soft black mud beside a small spring where the trail dipped through a swale of red alder. The mud was wet. The print was sharp. Owen crouched. He put his hand flat next to the print. The print was bigger than his hand. It was not a hunter's boot. Hunters wore lugged soles. This was smooth, heavy, the kind of boot a man wears when he is not trying to be quiet but does not want to slip. A work boot, or a uniform boot. Owen looked at the edges of the print, sharp, not from yesterday, from this morning, maybe an hour ago, maybe less. He stood very slowly. His heart was doing the thing, because nobody knew where he was. Nobody. He had told no one, except Eleanor Whitfield. And Eleanor Whitfield had a face that did not lie. So who was ahead of him on a trail to a place that wasn't on any map? He stood in the swale and he listened. The forest made the sounds forests make. Wind in the high branches, a jay somewhere, the small click of water moving over stones in the spring. Nothing else. But Owen had spent 4 years learning to listen to the spaces between sounds. There was a wrongness in the air. He pulled the chart from inside his coat. He looked at the line. Cutter past spur. He looked at the trail ahead. He could turn back. He could walk down the mountain and rent his room again, and forget the chart, and forget the key in his pocket, and forget the brass weight of a thing he didn't understand. He could. He didn't. He walked. Because his father had said, "Follow the rails that aren't on any map." He walked the rest of the afternoon. He walked carefully now. He walked the way a deer walks when it knows it is being watched. He did not whistle. He did not let his pack jingle. He kept his eyes on the ground for prints and his ears on the air for sounds that should not be there. He camped that night in a hollow off the grade. He did not light a fire. He ate cold beans from the tin and crawled into his sleeping bag and watched the stars come up through the firs. He thought about his mother washing the plate. He thought about his father's hand on his forehead. He thought about an old woman saying, "You have his eyes, not your father's, your grandfather's." He slept. He dreamed of trains he had never ridden. He woke before dawn. He broke camp in the dark. He was on the trail before the light came up. The second day was harder than the first. The grade climbed steeper. The trees thinned. The granite came up through the soil like the bones of the mountain itself. By noon, he was in fog. The fog had come up from the canyon ahead of him. It moved like a slow gray animal. It wrapped itself around the trees and the rails in his coat. He could not see 50 feet ahead. He could hear something, though, far away, low, below him. A river. He kept walking. The grade leveled. The fog thickened. He was walking with his head down, watching the ties for loose spikes and rot, counting them maybe without meaning to. Step, tie, step, tie, step, tie. And then the ground simply dropped away on either side of him. The rails continued forward over nothing. He stopped. He looked up. The bridge stretched out into the fog. 200 feet of old timber and iron spike. The far end disappeared into gray. He could hear the river below. He could not see it. He stood on the near end of the trestle, and he felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt small. He felt 8 years old. He felt his father's hand on his forehead. He stepped out onto the bridge. He tested each tie before he trusted his weight to it. The old timber was harder than he expected, dense with age, dark with decades of weather. The square-cut iron spikes had rusted into the wood so thoroughly that the tie and the spike had become a single thing. He was halfway across when the storm hit. It came without warning. The fog turned to rain in a single second. The rain came sideways off the canyon wall. It came hard enough to blur the difference between the bridge in the sky and the river below. The wind came up the canyon with the smell of cold rock and wet pine. Owen did the only practical thing available to him. He got down low. He pressed himself flat against the ties. He pulled his jacket up over his head. He waited. And that was when he saw it. Not the whole thing at first, just a corner, a shape. Something that wasn't wood and wasn't rust and wasn't stone. He turned his face sideways against the wet timber. He squinted. Between two of the heavy crossbeams, half buried under a layer of grit and dead lichen and what looked like decades of accumulated debris, a panel, dark metal, roughly square, maybe 18 inches across, set flush into the framework of the bridge so precisely that from any normal walking angle it would have been invisible. Just another dark patch between the ties, just shadow. He reached toward it without thinking. The grit shifted under his fingertips, cold metal beneath, not just surface rust. The kind of deep oxidation that happens when iron and moisture share a long, undisturbed relationship. But the edges were straight, too straight. His heart was doing the uncomfortable thing. He felt along the near side. His fingers found a recessed ring, flat against the surface, hinged. A hatch, the rain was hammering his back. Water was running down his neck inside his collar. The river was making its invisible noise far below. The fog had thickened to a wall. He got his fingers under the ring. He pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder, braced against the adjacent beam, felt something shift. Not much, but enough. He worked at it for 2 minutes. He was soaked through. His fingers were going numb from the cold and the iron. And then, With one long protesting shriek of metal on metal, the hatch opened. He looked down into darkness, not an empty darkness. After a moment, with the rain light filtering in from above, he could make out a ladder, iron rungs, set directly into rock. Real rock. The bridge was anchored to an outcropping that jutted from the canyon wall. Someone had cut directly into that stone. The ladder descended maybe 15 feet before it met a surface he couldn't quite read from above. A floor, flat and level. He lay there for a long moment, one hand on the hatch ring, cold water streaming past his knuckles. He thought about what a reasonable person would do. A reasonable person would not climb down an unknown ladder into a hole in a rock on a bridge in the middle of a mountain rainstorm in a place where nobody knew he was. A reasonable person would close the hatch and walk back down the mountain. Owen was not a reasonable person. He had never been a reasonable person. He got his boots over the edge. He found the first rung. It held. The second rung held. He pulled the hatch down over his head as he descended, not closing it fully, just enough to cut the worst of the rain. The darkness thickened around him with each step. He could still hear the storm through the gap. Muffled now, distant seeming. The river below was doing its patient work. His own breathing was loud. His boots found the floor. He stood still and waited for his eyes. The darkness wasn't total. He understood that after maybe 30 seconds of standing still, letting his eyes do the slow work of adjusting. There was a seam of pale gray light somewhere ahead. Not much, thin as a knife blade, but enough to give the dark a shape. He could make out the floor beneath his boots, pale stone cut almost level. He could make out the rough walls pressing close on either side. He could make out the low ceiling just clearing his head by a few inches. The rock above him scored with chisel marks that hadn't been smoothed away. He didn't move yet. He just stood and breathed and listened. No dripping except from his own jacket. No wind. The storm was up there somewhere, behind the hatch, behind the iron and the ties and the rails. It felt almost theoretical now, the way weather does when you're underground and the stone has swallowed it. The river was still audible. A low frequency, more felt than heard, moving through the rock itself. He took one step forward, then another. The passage opened. He felt it before he saw it. The air changed. The closeness fell away on both sides. He understood he had moved from a corridor into a room. His outstretched hand found a wall. He moved along it slowly. His fingers found a shelf. His knuckles knocked against something solid. It skittered. He caught it without thinking. A candle. A glass jar holding a candle. He patted the shelf more carefully and found what he was hoping for. A small box of matches. Cardboard. Slightly damp but not wet through. He took his time with the first match, sheltering the flame with both hands. He touched it to the wick. The room came up. It wasn't large, maybe 12 feet by 14. The low ceiling continued overhead, except in the center where someone had chipped the rock upward to make a kind of vault, just enough to stand fully upright. The walls were the natural canyon stone, but things had been done to them. Shelves had been cut directly from the rock and supplemented with rough timber planking bolted into drilled holes. A cast iron wood stove sat against the far wall. Its pipe disappeared upward into a channel that had been bored through the stone. Heading, Owen realized toward some crevice in the canyon wall where smoke could escape unseen. Beside the stove was a small stack of split wood, dry as chalk. On the shelves, in the wavering yellow light, Owen could see cans, dozens of them, unlabeled, their lids sealed with what looked like wax. Beside them, glass jars beside those, folded cloth beside that. Tools arranged in order of size on a strip of pegboard. At the far wall, almost invisible until he moved the candle. A window, narrow, horizontal, cut from the stone like an embrasure in a fort. He moved toward it slowly, holding the flame steady. He pressed his face close to the narrow gap in the stone. He looked through. The window had been cut at an angle, slanting slightly downward, so that a person standing inside could see without being seen from below. It framed a view so unexpected that he went still for a long moment. Far below, maybe 200 feet down the sheer canyon wall, the river ran green and pale through the last gray light of the storm. He could see the white foam where it broke around boulders. He could see the cottonwoods bent along the near bank. The river was narrow from up here, a silver thread stitched through the canyon floor. The constant low roar he had assumed was wind was the river. He had been hearing it since he dropped through the hatch. It was the sound the whole place breathed. He pulled back from the window. He turned to take stock. This was not a shelter thrown up in desperation. Someone had planned this. Someone had come here, more than once. Someone had thought about what would be needed. Someone had worked the stone over weeks, or months. Someone had made a place that could sustain a person. The question was, who? The deeper question pressing up through the floor like the cold from the canyon stone was why. Owen set the candle on the workbench. He started with the crate nearest the stove. He worked the way he had learned to work. Systematic. Start at one edge, work across. Don't skip around. Don't let curiosity pull you out of order. The crate held mason jars packed in straw, each one sealed with a rubber gasketed lid. Green beans, corn, beets, peaches and syrup, the fruit still holding color. Whoever had put these up had known what they were doing. He found no swollen seals, no rust under the rings. The second crate held dry goods sealed in glass, coffee, salt, dried beans, a paper-wrapped block of something that turned out to be hard sugar, gone crystalline at the edges. And then he found the box. It had been underneath the dry goods, set flat against the crate bottom, wrapped in oilcloth and tied with twine. He sat on the floor with it across his knees. He worked the knot loose slowly. His fingers were stiff in the cold. Inside the oilcloth was a wooden box about the size of a Bible. The wood smoothed and darkened with handling. The lid fit with a satisfying precision that spoke of someone who understood joinery. Inside the box were papers. He held the candle close. The top sheet was a hand-drawn diagram. The bridge, the canyon, a cross-section of the rock face showing the cavity in profile. Measurements were noted in pencil with a draftsman's precision. These weren't rough field notes. They were a record someone had made after the work was finished, as if documenting what they had built, for someone else to find. He set the plans aside. The next sheet was a list. Towns. Some had check marks beside them. Others were crossed out. He read the list twice without understanding it. The last item in the box was a photograph, black and white, the edges curled, two men standing on what was clearly this bridge, the canyon visible behind them. Owen brought the candle close to the photograph. The light wavered. His hand was not steady. One of the men was holding something in his hands, a tool, or maybe a length of pipe. The other man was looking not at the camera, but out toward the canyon, as if watching for something. Owen brought the candle closer, the man with the tool, his face. Owen's breath stopped, because the face in the photograph was not his father's. It was a face he had never seen, except. The eyes were his eyes. He had seen them in mirrors his whole life. His grandfather, William Hartley, a man who had been dead before Owen was born. A man Owen had never met. A man whose name his father had spoken only once, like a secret, like a door. Owen turned the photograph over. On the back, in pencil, in a hand he did not recognize. Spring 1959. The work continues. W.H. Owen sat very still on the cold stone floor. The candle burned. The river breathed through the rock. The work continues. Whose work? For who? For what? The other man in the photograph, the one looking out at the canyon. His face had been scratched, not damaged by time, damaged on purpose. Someone had taken something sharp to the photograph and scraped the face away. You could see the curve of the head, the set of the shoulders, the hand holding the rail, but not the face. Whoever that second man had been, someone had not wanted him remembered. Owen sat on the floor of his grandfather's hidden room and held a photograph from before he was born and felt the past pressing against him like a hand on his chest. He did not know how long he sat there. The candle burned low. He found another one in a jar on the shelf and lit it from the first. The room was warm against the canyon cold. The stove was cold. He thought about lighting a fire. He decided against it. If someone was up there. He did not want smoke giving him away. He ate cold beans from the tin. He drank water from his canteen. He laid his sleeping bag out on the floor near the workbench. He sat down in the chair and closed his eyes for what he meant to be a minute. He fell asleep where he sat. He didn't dream. The room was too deep for dreams. The stone above and below and around him was too old. The river was too patient. He slept the way you sleep when the world has finally stopped chasing you for one night. He didn't know how long he had been asleep when the sound woke him. He didn't know what woke him at first. The candle had gone out. The room was dark. The thin gray seam of the window showed no light. Night had come. He sat still in the chair. He listened. Above him, through the stone, through the iron and the ties and the rails, a sound, a footstep, slow, heavy, a pause, then another footstep. Owen did not breathe. He did not move, his hand on the arm of the chair, his other hand reaching very slowly, toward the hunting knife on his belt. Step, step, pause, step. Whoever it was. They were walking across the bridge, in the dark, in the middle of the night, 100 feet above any reasonable place to be. The footsteps stopped. Owen counted his heartbeats. He got to 10 before the footsteps started again. They were directly above him now. He could feel them through the stone. Not hear. Feel. A heavy weight pressing down through the timber of the bridge into the rock that held his grandfather's room. The footsteps stopped again, directly over the hatch. A long silence. Owen could not breathe. He could not blink. He could not exist. The silence stretched out and out and out until Owen thought it might never end. Until he thought maybe time itself had stopped. Until he thought maybe whoever was up there had reached down and opened the hatch and was looking at him right now in the dark. The silence broke. The footsteps moved on. Step, step, slowly. The weight moved away, across the bridge, toward the far side, the side Owen had not yet seen. Then nothing. Owen sat in the dark and listened to the river breathing in the stone. He listened for a long time. He never heard the footsteps come back. But he didn't sleep again that night. He sat in the chair until the gray seam of the window began to lighten. Until the dawn came up out of the canyon and the river turned silver and a single bird called once from somewhere far below. And he understood that whatever this was, whatever his grandfather had built, whatever his father had continued, whatever the work was that continued, someone else knew about it too. Someone else was looking. And Owen Hartley, 21 years old, alone in a hole in a rock under an abandoned bridge on a railroad that wasn't on any map. Owen Hartley was no longer the only one on the trail. He looked at the photograph on the workbench. His grandfather's eyes looked back at him. The work continues. Owen Hartley swallowed. He picked up the candle. He picked up the box. He turned the photograph over so the scratched face wasn't watching him. And he began, very quietly, very carefully, to plan what he was going to do next. Owen waited until the light through the window had gone from gray to pale gold. He didn't move. He counted to 500. Then he counted to 500 again. Because if whoever had been up there last night was still up there, waiting, patient, listening for him to come out. Then 500 wasn't enough. 1,000 wasn't enough. 10,000 wasn't enough. But at some point, a man has to move. At some point, a man has to find out. He gathered his pack. He took the wooden box, the plans, the list, the photograph. He left the food on the shelves. He left the tools on the pegboard. He left the candles in their jars. Because he might come back. Because he was already thinking, without having decided to think it. He was already thinking that he might come back. He climbed the iron ladder slowly. He stopped at the top. He pressed his ear to the inside of the hatch. Nothing. Wind maybe. The morning kind of wind. The kind that comes up the canyon with the sun. He pushed the hatch open 1 inch, then 2, then enough to get his eyes above the timber. The bridge was empty. The fog was gone. The sky was high and pale. The sun was somewhere behind the eastern ridge, but the light had already reached the trees on the far rim. He pulled himself up onto the ties. He closed the hatch behind him. He kicked grit in dead lichen back over the panel until it looked like nothing again. Until it looked like exactly what his grandfather had wanted it to look like. Then he stood up. Then he saw the marks. In the dew on the timber, about 10 feet from the hatch, toward the eastern end of the bridge, 2 boot prints, the same boot. The smooth, heavy work boot from the swale 2 days back. The prints faced toward the hatch. He had been right. The man had stood there. The man had stood directly over Owen for a long time, looking down, maybe wondering, maybe knowing, maybe doing whatever it is that a man like that does when he is deciding. Owen looked at the prints. The dew was thin where the boot had pressed. The prints were old, hours old, whoever it was. He was gone now, or he was watching from the trees. Owen looked at the trees. The trees did not look back. He went down. Not by the trail he had come up. He didn't know who might be on it. He took the eastern end of the bridge, the end he had not yet crossed, the end his father had crossed, and his grandfather had crossed, and the man with the scratched face in the photograph had crossed. He stepped off the bridge into the brush on the far side, and the world opened up. A narrow path led down into the canyon. Not a game trail. The width was wrong, too deliberate. The ground packed in a way that spoke of repeated use over years. He followed it. It switched back twice through dense spruce before leveling along the riverbank. Down here, the canyon walls rose on both sides like the inside of a cathedral. Pale granite shot through with quartz. The morning light coming down in slow, bright bars through the cottonwoods. He found his grandfather's map in his pack, the hand-drawn one. D.C., a small square marked D.C. He didn't know yet what D.C. meant. He oriented himself against the map. He found the river bend. He found the rough triangle that marked the ridge above the bridge. The dotted line ran north along the east bank. He followed it. He walked for 40 minutes. He found the clearing. It was not a natural clearing. The spruce had been cut back decades ago and the stumps had rotted nearly flat. But the clearing remained open. The ground covered in tall grass and something else beneath the grass that he understood as he stepped closer. Raised beds, 12 of them, arranged in 2 parallel rows, built from logs that had long since silvered. Someone had farmed here. Owen moved through the rows slowly. The soil in the beds was darker than the surrounding ground, still rich looking. At the far edge of this clearing, the small square from the map, a low stone structure barely visible beneath a collapse of brush and a birch tree that had grown up through the corner of it. A cash shed. The roof had fallen in on one side. The wall stood, built from flat stones mortared with what looked like clay. The whole thing no larger than a garden shed. The door was a single plank hung on hand-forged hinges. Owen took the brass key from his pocket. He looked at the door. There was no lock. The door was swollen shut from years of moisture. He put the key back in his pocket. He worked the door open with his shoulder. The smell that came out was cedar and dust and something sweet underneath, like fruit that had been sealed away. Shelves along two walls, mostly empty. A rusted hand cultivator hanging from a nail. Two ceramic crocks sealed with wax-dipped cloth. And on the highest shelf, a small tin box with a hasp latch. He reached for the tin box first. Then he stopped himself. The crocks deserved attention too. Anything sealed that long deserved attention. He lifted the nearest crock from the shelf. Heavy. He could feel liquid shifting inside. He set it just outside the doorway in the gray morning light. He worked his thumbnail gently under the cloth. The wax gave in flakes. Plum. Dark amber. Still food. Still good. Some woman or man had stood in this clearing in a year that Owen couldn't name, and had picked plums and had cooked them and had sealed them and had carried the crock up here and put it on this shelf. For who? For what? He took down the tin box. He worked the hasp open with his thumbnail. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, gone brittle at the edges. A bundle. He unfolded it. Seed packets, a dozen of them, hand-labeled, plum tomato, pole bean, winter squash, sweet corn. The handwriting was different from the handwriting on the back of the photograph. This handwriting Owen knew. He went still. He knew this handwriting. He had seen it on a Christmas card his father had written to his mother when Owen was 6. He had seen it on a note left in the kitchen when his father had to go to the rail yard early. He had seen it on the inside cover of a book his father had given him for his 7th birthday. To my Owen. With love always. Dad. Owen sat down hard on the stone floor of the shed. He held the seed packets in his hand, and his hand was shaking, and he could not stop it from shaking. Beneath the packets, folded twice, a small leather notebook. He opened it. The first page, in the same handwriting, the handwriting that had written, "To my Owen with love always." The notebook was his father's journal. Owen put both hands flat on the stone floor. He breathed. He waited. He waited for his eyes to clear enough to read. The first entry was dated March 14th, 1972. Margaret came in last night. She is 29 years old. She is 6 months pregnant. She is from a town 2 valleys east. Her husband broke her left wrist with a hammer. She walked 70 miles to get here. Eleanor brought her up the back way. Eleanor said the girl wouldn't last another month at home. We have set her up in the boarding house in Belden under the name Margaret Pike. The papers are clean. The papers are always clean. Father would have liked her. She has steady hands. She does not cry. Owen turned the page. He could not feel his fingers. He could not feel the floor. April 2nd, 1972. Margaret is settling. She works at the bakery now. The baby is due in July. She asked me yesterday why we do this. I told her my father started it in 1959. After the war. After he saw what he saw in the Pacific and decided that the worst things people do to each other are the things they do behind closed doors in their own houses. I told her my father built the bridge place first, then the clearing, then the line of safe houses going east. He called it the quiet line because the women came in quiet and they left quiet and nobody needed to know their names. We do not call it by the other name, the famous one. That name belongs to others, to a different freedom. We do not borrow it. We work in a quieter way. Owen turned the page. July 19th, 1972. Margaret had her baby this morning, a boy. She named him Owen after her grandfather. She asked me if I would let her put my name on the birth certificate as the father. I said yes. I said yes without thinking. I said yes before she finished asking. Because I have loved her since the night she walked 70 miles with a broken wrist. And because the boy will need a father. And because I have already decided that I am the man for the job, whether or not the world thinks I am qualified. Owen put the journal down. He put it down because he was not going to be able to read it anymore if he did not stop. He put his face in his hands. He sat on the cold stone floor of the cash shed. His mother had walked 70 miles with a broken wrist. His mother had not cried at the kitchen sink because his mother had spent the first 29 years of her life learning how to not cry, learning that crying did not stop the next thing, learning that the only way to survive was to do the dishes and look out the window and feel nothing on the outside, even when everything was burning on the inside. His mother had not been cold. His mother had been holding herself together for him. Owen Hartley sat on a stone floor in a clearing in the woods, and he understood his mother for the first time in his life. He understood her at 21 years old, 13 years too late. He picked up the journal. He kept reading. The entries continued. Margaret learning the work. Margaret helping the next woman come through. Margaret choosing this life. The boy growing up in a small house on Mercer Street, while his father worked the rail yard by day and ran the quiet line by night. Owen read until he found the entry he was looking for, without knowing he was looking for it. October 10th, 1981. 3 days from now, I will not be coming home. Frank Holloway came to the rail yard yesterday. He says he knows what we are doing. He says his sister Lily went through here in 1976 and never came back to her husband. He says her husband is his cousin and the family wants her back, and he has spent 5 years figuring out who took her. He doesn't believe me when I tell him she chose to go. He doesn't believe me when I tell him her husband broke her ribs and her nose and her jaw. He thinks women belong where they are placed. He told me he will tear apart Margaret and the boy to find the list of names. He told me if I disappear, he won't bother them. He told me he only wants the operation shut down and the list destroyed. I do not believe the second part. I believe the first part. I have to go. I have arranged with Ruth Calloway at the Vermont end of the line. She will take me in. She is a widow. She has lost more than I will ever lose. She understands. I will write Margaret 1 letter a month for the rest of my life. Eleanor will hold the letters. Margaret will read them. The boy will not. Not until he is old enough. If he ever finds this notebook, if he ever stands where I am standing now, then he will be old enough. Owen, if you are reading this, I am sorry. I am sorry I left. I am sorry I could not be a father to you in the daylight. I love you. I have loved you since the day your mother put you in my arms and you reached up and grabbed my finger and would not let go. You were not my son by blood. You were my son by every other measure that has ever mattered. I hope you find this place. I hope it tells you what I could not tell you. The work continues. Dad? Owen read the entry 3 times. The third time he read it out loud. He read it out loud to the empty shed and to the spruce trees and to the clearing where his grandfather had farmed and his father had farmed, and where some woman whose name he would never know had grown plums and sealed them in a crock for a boy not yet born. He read it out loud and he did not stop. His voice cracked. He kept reading, because if he stopped, he was going to come apart, and he could not come apart yet. He could not come apart until he understood what he was supposed to do. He folded the journal carefully. He wrapped it back in its oilcloth. He put it in his pack. He stood up. He walked out of the shed into the clearing. The sun was over the canyon rim now. The grass in the raised beds was wet and bright. He stood among the rows. He looked east. Frank Holloway. The name sat in his chest like an iron weight. Owen had grown up in this valley. He had heard that name his whole life. He had heard it in the way people said it in the post office, and the way people said it in the diner, and the way people said it in the bleachers at the high school football game. Frank Holloway had been a deputy when Owen was small. Frank Holloway was the sheriff of Belden County now. His name was on every speeding ticket in the valley. His face was on the wall of the post office above the words, "Vote Holloway." His face was on the campaign signs. His face had been smiling at Owen all the way through Owen's childhood, and Owen had never once known that his face was the face of the man who had driven Owen's father into hiding. Owen sat down on one of the raised beds. He put his head on his knees. He stayed like that for a long time. When he stood up, he was a different man than he had been when he sat down. Not a better man, not a worse man. A man who knew. He hiked back to town that afternoon. He took the long way. He took a route his father's map showed, but the survey chart didn't. He came down a logging road 3 miles east of Belden Creek. He came into town from the south instead of the north. He came in dirty and tired and unshaven and looking like exactly what he was, a young man who had been in the woods for 3 days. He did not go to his room above the hardware store. He went to Eleanor's. She opened the door before he knocked. She looked at his face. She did not speak. She stepped back. He came in. The kitchen was warm. There was bread on the counter, cooling on a rack. You read it? Yes, all of it. Enough of it. She sat down at the small table. He sat across from her. She did not offer tea this time. This was not a tea conversation. He's still alive. Yes. Where? You read that too. Vermont. Yes. A woman named Ruth. Yes. You knew. I knew. You knew for 13 years. I knew for 13 years. He looked at her. She did not look away. Why didn't you tell me? It wasn't mine to tell. I was a child. You were a child. I needed my father. Your father needed you to be alive. Owen put his fists on the table. He did not slam them down. He pressed them down until his knuckles went white. She watched him. She did not flinch. Eleanor. Yes. Frank Holloway. She closed her eyes. She nodded. He has been watching this house for 13 years too. Different from the way he watched your mother. Quieter. He never came inside. He just drove by. Tuesday afternoons. Always Tuesday afternoons. I would see his cruiser slow at the mailbox and then keep going. He knew you knew. He knew I knew. He just didn't know what. Owen unclenched his fists. He put his hands flat on the table. He was on the mountain yesterday, the night before. He came across the bridge. He stood right above me. Eleanor went pale. She was already pale. She went paler. Then he knows. He knows where it is. He knows. Owen. Yes. You can't go back up there alone. I have to. He will kill you. I have to go back. The list, the names of the women. They're not in the bridge place. I looked. They must be somewhere else. Somewhere he hasn't found yet. I have to find them before he does. Owen. He told my father he would tear my mother apart to find that list. Eleanor. If he gets those names, if he gets the addresses where those women have been living for 20 years, he won't stop. He won't stop with my father. He'll go after every one of them. He'll send them all back. She closed her eyes. She put her hand over her mouth. She nodded. I know. Where would my grandfather have hidden them? I don't know. Yes, you do. Owen, you do. She opened her eyes. She looked at him. She did not look at the bread on the counter or the window or the floor. She looked at him. There is a stone in the bridge place, under the workbench, in the floor. It comes up. Your grandfather showed it to me once. In 1962. I haven't been up there since. I don't know if it's still. It's still. You don't know that. It's still. I know my grandfather. I know what kind of man he was. He built a stove that vents through a crack in a cliff. He cut a ladder into solid rock. He hid a hatch so well that no one found it for 35 years. He didn't make things that don't last. The stone is still. She looked at him a long time. You have his stubbornness. I have his eyes. You said, you have both. He left her house at sunset. She caught his sleeve at the door. Owen. Yes, if you find them, the names, the addresses, you bring them straight to me. Don't take them anywhere else. Don't take them to a police station. Don't take them to a lawyer. You bring them to me. I know where to send them. I have known where to send them for 40 years. Do you hear me? I hear you. Promise me. I promise. She kissed him on the cheek. Her lips were dry. She smelled like cedar and bread and something else. Something old. Something kind. He walked into town. He did not go back to his room above the hardware store. He took the back way out of town. He cut across the meadow behind the elementary school. He crossed the creek at the deep place where nobody could see him from the road. He climbed. He climbed in the dark. He climbed all night. The moon came up around midnight, half full, cold light, the kind of light that helps you climb but doesn't help you hide. He reached the trestle bridge at the gray hour before dawn. He stopped at the western end. He listened. The river breathed in the canyon below. Nothing else. He crossed the bridge. He opened the hatch. He went down. The room was the way he had left it. The candles, the food, the pegboard tools. He went to the workbench. He moved it. The workbench was bolted to the rock at one end, but it pivoted on the bolt. He swung it aside. The floor underneath was stone. But one of the stones was different. The grouting around it was thinner. The stone itself had been cut from the same canyon granite, but it sat just slightly proud of the others. The way a stone sits when it has been lifted up and put back down hundreds of times. He found the seam with his knife. He pried. The stone came up. Underneath was a cavity, cut into the rock, lined with oilcloth. Inside the cavity was a tin box, a larger box than the one in the cash shed, about the size of a family Bible. He lifted it out. He set it on the workbench. He opened it. Inside were ledger books, 3 of them, bound in dark cloth. He opened the first one. Names, hundreds of names, each entry in his grandfather's hand, then in his father's hand, each entry with a date, a place of origin, a description, sometimes a note, husband bone breaker, husband drinker, husband choker, husband gun. After each name and entry, a new name, a new identity, the town they had been sent to, the work they had been given, the handful of people in that new place who had been told only what they needed to know. Owen turned the pages. Margaret Pike, 29 years old, from the Wenatchee Valley. Husband broke wrist, pregnant, sent to Belden. New identity, Margaret Hartley. Work bakery. Owen put his hand on the page. He could see his mother's name on the page. She had been 29 years old. She had been broken. She had been sent to a town she had never been to a job she had never done, to a man she had never met, and she had built a life there. She had built a life there with that man. She had built a life there with Owen. He kept reading. There, Lily Holloway, 35 years old, from the Cascades East. Husband broke ribs, jaw, nose. Police or family? Police or family? 3 words. Owen stared at them. Frank Holloway was at the police. Frank Holloway's cousin had been the husband. Frank Holloway had spent 5 years figuring out that his sister had been helped, and he had been right about who helped her. He had just been wrong about why. Sent to Bangor, Maine. New identity, Lily Bennett. Work school teacher. There was a note below, in his father's hand. Lily came to us with 2 broken ribs and a hairline jaw and a bruise on her neck the size of a man's hand. She does not want her brother to know she is alive. She says he will take her home. She says her brother is the one who told her she had to stay. Owen closed the ledger. He held it against his chest. He held it like a child. The river breathed in the canyon, through the rock. Patient, old, knowing. He put the 3 ledgers in his pack. He put the stone back. He set the workbench back. He left no trace. He climbed the ladder. He pushed the hatch up. He came out into a gray dawn. A man was standing at the eastern end of the bridge. Owen saw him as he came up out of the hatch. The man was big. The man was wearing a heavy work coat in the smooth, heavy work boots that had left their print in the swale and on the bridge timbers. The man was wearing a sheriff's star, Frank Holloway. He had a rifle in his hands. The rifle was not pointed at Owen yet. The rifle was pointed at the ties. The two of them looked at each other across 200 feet of fog in rotting wood in morning light. "Son," the voice carried across the bridge. It was deep. It was calm. It was a voice that had been telling people what to do for 30 years. "You're going to come over here, slowly, with your hands where I can see them, and you're going to hand me whatever you took out of that hole." Owen did not move. "Son, did you hear me?" "I heard you." "Then start walking." "No." The rifle came up. Now it was pointed at Owen's chest. "Walk." "I said no." "Boy, I have been a peace officer for 27 years. I have shot one man in all of it, a long time ago, a drunk with a knife. It haunts me still. Do not make me explain to a coroner why you are at the bottom of a canyon. You won't shoot? Why not? Because you don't know if I have the names with me. If I fall in the canyon, you lose them forever." There was a long silence. Frank Holloway did not lower the rifle, but he did not pull the trigger either. "You're smarter than your father." "My father is smart. Your father is dead." "My father is in Vermont." The rifle wavered, just for a second, just for a heartbeat. But Owen saw it. "How do you know that?" "I read his journal." Frank Holloway's face did something Owen could not name. Something deep, something almost human. "Boy, he stole my sister from me." "He didn't steal her. She walked. She walked because he told her to. She walked because her husband broke her ribs. She walked because her husband broke her jaw. She walked because if she stayed, she would be dead. Your sister knew that. The only person who didn't know that was you. You don't know what you're talking about." "I read it in his journal. Words on a page. From a man who took my sister and left her to disappear into a country full of strangers. I never knew. For 5 years, I thought she was dead in a ditch. She wasn't in a ditch. She was teaching school in Maine. And you're going to tell me which town?" "No." "Boy." "No." The rifle steadied. "Last chance." "Sheriff." A new voice, a voice from behind Frank Holloway, a small voice, a woman's voice. A 70-year-old woman who had come up the Eastern Trail at her age in the early light because she had not been able to sleep. Eleanor Whitfield was standing at the eastern end of the bridge with a deer rifle of her own, pointed at the small of Frank Holloway's back. "Put it down, Frank." He did not turn. "Eleanor, put it down. You shoot a county sheriff in the back, you spend the rest of your life in prison. I'm 70 years old. I have been a widow for 34 years. I have no children. The rest of my life is not as much as you might think. Put the rifle down." Owen was breathing hard. He was breathing the way you breathe when your whole life is happening in front of you, and you cannot move, and you cannot speak, and you cannot do anything but watch. Frank Holloway lowered his rifle a half-inch. "Eleanor! Down all the way! You old fool! Down!" He started to lower the rifle. He was going to do it. Owen saw him decide, saw the muscles in his shoulder soften, saw the barrel begin its slow drop toward the timber. And then Frank Holloway moved. He turned hard to his right. He pivoted on his boot. He brought the rifle around toward Eleanor with the speed of a man half his age. The shot came. Owen did not know who fired first. The shot echoed off of the canyon walls. It went up the canyon and down the canyon and into every cleft and crack and pine. It came back from a dozen directions all at once. Eleanor stepped back once. She looked surprised. She looked at Owen across the length of the bridge. She lifted one hand. She sat down, slowly. The way a person sits down when she is tired and has decided the day is over. She lay back on the timbers. She closed her eyes. She was still. Frank Holloway stood over her. He looked down at her for a long moment. Then he looked up at Owen. His face was empty. His face was a face that had done a thing it could not undo. Owen ran. He ran across the bridge. He didn't think about the rifle. He didn't think about whether Frank Holloway would shoot him. He didn't think about anything but Eleanor. Frank Holloway lifted the rifle. He pointed it at Owen. He didn't fire. He just watched Owen come. When Owen was 20 feet from Eleanor, Frank Holloway lowered the rifle. He stepped back. He turned. He walked off the eastern end of the bridge, into the trees, without looking back. Owen dropped to his knees next to her. Eleanor. Owen, don't. I can't help it, son. Don't talk. Don't move. I have to talk. Eleanor. She was looking past him. She was looking up at the sky. The sky was pale gold now. The sun was over the canyon rim. Vermont, Ruth Calloway's farm, north of Montpelier. The town is called Sterling. Tell him Eleanor, tell him I kept the letters. Eleanor. She closed her eyes. She opened them. She smiled. It was the smallest smile. Go find your father, Owen. Eleanor, go. Her hand went still in his. Her hand had been holding his. He had not realized until it stopped. A small woman. A woman who had spent 40 years quietly running a line of safe houses for women she had never been thanked for saving. Owen Hartley sat on a railroad trestle in the high country and held the hand of a 70-year-old woman who had come up the mountain to help him save the work. She had succeeded. She had paid for it. He did not know how long he sat there. The sun moved across the sky. The river breathed in the canyon below. After a long time, he became aware of footsteps behind him. Slow, cautious. He turned. A woman was standing at the western end of the bridge. She was 52 years old. She was wearing a long brown coat. She had her hair tied back. She was breathing hard from the climb. Her face was a face Owen had not really looked at in 13 years. His mother. Margaret Hartley stood at the western end of the bridge and looked at her son holding the body of Eleanor Whitfield in the middle of the timber. She put one hand over her mouth. She did not cry. She had spent the first 29 years of her life learning how to not cry, and she had spent the last 13 years remembering how. And right now in this moment on this bridge, she was holding herself together for him, the way she had always held herself together for him. She started walking, slowly, the way a woman walks across a bridge she has heard about her whole life but never seen. She crossed the bridge. She came to where her son was kneeling. She lowered herself to the timbers beside him. She put one hand on his shoulder. She put the other in Eleanor's hand, the hand that had stopped moving. 3 of them on the bridge, 2 of them living, 1 of them just gone. The morning kept being morning. The river kept being the river. Margaret Hartley spoke for the first time. Her voice was lower than Owen remembered, steadier than he remembered. Owen, Mom, I'm sorry. For what? For everything. He looked at her. Her face was a face he had not really looked at since he was 8 years old. He had spent 13 years not looking at her face because looking at it had hurt. He looked at her now. Her face was older than he remembered. Her eyes were the same. Her eyes were the eyes of a woman who had walked 70 miles with a broken wrist when she was 29. Mom? Yes. I read his journal. She nodded. She did not close her eyes. She just held his gaze. I know. How? Eleanor called me last night, late. She said you had read it. She said you were going up the mountain. She said someone had to come find you. She said she would go at first light. I told her I would come too. I drove to the trailhead. She had already left. I followed up the eastern path. I am still slow. She was always faster than me. You came. I came. You walked up here at your age. I walked up here at my age. I waited at the trailhead until the dark thinned. Then I climbed. She paused. She looked at Eleanor. She left before I caught up to her. Yes, she didn't trust me to be fast enough. No, she was right. Yes. Margaret Hartley put her hand on Eleanor's cheek. The cheek was already cooling. Thank you, old friend. She sat back. She looked at Owen. He's still alive. Yes. You know where? Vermont. Yes. Will you take me? Owen looked at her. The morning had become full morning. The sun was over the bridge. The river ran silver below. He looked at his mother. He looked at her eyes. He saw her for the first time. He saw the 29-year-old woman with the broken wrist who had walked 70 miles in the rain. He saw the 30-year-old woman who had built a life in a town she had never seen with a man she had just met. He saw the 39-year-old woman who had washed a plate 3 times at the kitchen sink while her husband disappeared because if she cried, the boy would break and the boy could not break. He saw the 40-year-old woman who had married a second man because the town expected her to. Because a single mother in 1983 was a thing the town did not understand. Because the second man had seemed quiet. Because the second man had seemed safe. He saw the woman who had spent the next 10 years living in that house with that second man and his slow accumulating violence, hiding it, absorbing it. Because telling her son meant telling her son why she had married him in the first place. Because telling her son meant telling her son everything she had not been able to tell him. He saw the woman who had let her son leave at 17 because keeping him would have killed him. He saw the woman who had not heard from her son in 4 years. He saw her for the first time in his life. He saw his mother. He put his arms around her. She was small. She was smaller than he remembered. She had spent 13 years getting smaller, eating less, sleeping less, becoming less and less the thing she had once been. She put her arms around him. She held him. She held him on a bridge in the high country with a quiet woman 3 feet away, and a sheriff somewhere in the trees, and a father waiting in Vermont, and a list of 247 names in a tin box and a pack on her son's back. She held him. And Owen Hartley, for the first time since he was 8 years old, did not feel alone. They did not leave Eleanor on the bridge. Margaret Hartley would not allow it. It took them 4 hours. Owen carried her down the Eastern Trail because the Eastern Trail was shorter and because the Western Trail went past town and the town was not safe. He carried her on his back. She weighed almost nothing. She weighed less than his pack. A woman who had been built like a bird that had outlived 3 generations of cats was a woman who weighed less than 41 pounds of food and a tin box of names. Margaret walked behind him. She did not speak. She watched her son's shoulders. She watched the way he set each foot down on the rotted ties of the old grade. She watched him grow into the man he was about to be. At the bottom of the canyon, they came to the river. Margaret had not asked where they were going. Margaret had not needed to ask. There was a fire road 3 miles east. There was a logging camp another 2 miles past that. There was a man at the logging camp who had been a friend of Everett Hartley's in 1980 and would still be a friend now. Owen did not know any of this. His mother did. She led the way once they were off the trail. He followed her. He had spent 13 years not following his mother anywhere, and now he was following her through a forest she had not walked in 22 years, and she did not hesitate. Not once. She knew where she was going. She had known since she was 29 years old. She had simply not had a reason to walk it again. Until now. The logging camp was a single trailer at the end of a dirt road. The man who came out of the trailer was 60. His beard was white. His eyes were not surprised. He looked at Margaret. He looked at what she was helping her son carry. He looked at Margaret again. Margie? Hello, Pete. It's Eleanor. Yes. How? Frank Holloway. Pete closed his eyes. He nodded. He stepped back from his door. Bring her inside. I'll make the calls. The calls took 2 days. Eleanor Whitfield was given a quiet service in the small cemetery behind the Presbyterian Church in Belden. A handful of women came. Women Owen had seen his whole life. Women he had passed on the sidewalk and not known. Women who had worked at the bakery and the post office and the library and the school. Women in their 50s and 60s and 70s. Women with the particular careful posture of women who had once been hurt and were no longer. They stood around the grave. Each of them put a single thing on the casket: a wooden spoon, a library card, a school teacher's red pen, a wedding ring, a small brass key. None of them spoke. They did not need to. Margaret stood at the head of the grave with her hand in Owen's. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. When it was over, the women came one by one to Margaret. Each of them touched her face. Each of them said one thing in a voice too low for Owen to hear. Then each of them walked away into the cool spring afternoon. The last one to come was a woman Owen knew. It was the woman from the bakery on Main Street, the woman who had given him bread heels for free when he was hungry and broke and 17. Her hair was gray. Her name was Helen. She looked at Owen. She put her hand on his cheek. "I came through in 1969. Ma'am, your grandfather brought me. Your father drove the back roads. Eleanor wrote my new papers. Ma'am, I have had 25 years that I would not have had." She kissed his forehead. She walked away. Pete drove them to the bus station in Wenatchee that night. He had a brown station wagon with a busted muffler. He did not ask where they were going. He pressed an envelope into Margaret's hand at the curb. She tried to give it back. "Don't. Pete. Margie, don't." She closed her hand around the envelope. She nodded. He hugged her. He shook Owen's hand. He drove away. The envelope had $2,000 in it. It had been collected at the service. It had been collected from women who had walked 70 miles or 50 miles or 100 miles to get to Belden in a year that they had not been certain they would live to see the end of. Owen and Margaret rode the Greyhound east: Spokane, Missoula, Billings, Bismarck, Fargo, Minneapolis. 3 days on the bus. His mother slept against his shoulder. He watched the country go by. He had hitchhiked across a lot of this country in the past 4 years. He had never seen it the way he saw it now. He had been looking at it as a man going somewhere away from something. Now he was looking at it as a man going somewhere towards something. The country looked different in that direction. Bigger, stranger, quieter. In Minneapolis, they changed buses. In Chicago, they changed buses again. In Cleveland, a man sat next to Owen and tried to sell him a watch. Owen did not buy the watch. In Albany, they changed buses for the last time. They got off in a small Vermont town just before midnight. Sterling, Vermont. Population 800. A diner with the lights on. A gas station closed for the night. A church with white clapboards in a steeple. A street lamp humming. The kind of late spring night where the air still carries the memory of frost. Owen had not been east of the Mississippi in his life. He stood at the curb with his pack and his mother, and he looked at the sleeping town. Margaret was looking at the diner. There. There what? That's where Pete called. The number we had. 40 hours ago. They said she would meet us at the diner, whenever we got in. They. Ruth. Ruth Calloway. Yes. Owen looked at the diner. A woman was sitting at a window booth. She was alone. She was 60 years old. She had her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She was watching the door. She had been watching the door for 40 hours. Owen and Margaret walked across the empty street. The bell on the diner door jangled. The woman in the window booth stood up. She did not move toward them. She just stood up. She was tall. She had iron gray hair pulled back into a knot. Her face was weathered the way the face of a woman who had spent her life outside is weathered. Her eyes were gentle. She looked at Margaret first, then at Owen, then back at Margaret. She did not speak. She crossed the diner to them and she took Margaret's hands in her own, and the two women stood there at the booth in the empty Vermont diner at midnight and held each other's hands. Then Ruth Calloway turned to Owen. She looked at him a long moment. She put her hand on the side of his face. "You have his eyes." "Yes, ma'am." "He has been waiting." "Ma'am?" "He has been waiting 13 years. The Calloway farm was 4 miles outside of town. It sat on the side of a hill. It had a red barn and a white house and a small orchard of apple trees and a chicken coop and a dog named Bart who came down the porch steps in the cold dark and stood politely beside Ruth's truck while she helped Margaret out. The house had one light burning. The light was in the kitchen. Through the window, Owen could see a man sitting at a table. The man was facing the door. The man had been sitting at that table since the phone call 40 hours ago. He stood when the truck stopped. He did not move toward the door. He just stood. Owen got out of the truck. He helped his mother down. The two of them stood in the yard. They looked at the kitchen window. The man in the window looked back at them. He was 54 years old. His hair had gone white. His beard had gone white. He was thinner than Owen remembered. He was thinner than the man in the photograph from 1959. He was thinner than the father who had knelt by the bed in a small house on Mercer Street 13 years ago and said, "Follow the rails that aren't on any map." But the eyes were the same. The eyes were the same eyes that had looked at Owen across a kitchen table in 1979. The same eyes that had looked at him over the rim of a coffee cup in 1980. The same eyes that had looked down at him from the dark above his bed in 1981 and said, "Promise me. Promise me." Owen could not move. His feet would not move. He stood in the yard with his mother, and he could not make his feet move. His mother put her hand on his back. "Go, Mom. Go to him, Owen." Owen, I don't know how." "Yes, you do." She pushed him gently. He took one step, then another. Then he was walking across the yard. Then he was running. The kitchen door opened. His father came down the porch steps. He came down faster than a man with white hair and a thin face should have come down. He came down the way a man comes down when he has been waiting 13 years for one specific sound. The sound of his son's footsteps in the yard. They met in the yard. Everett Hartley put his arms around his son, and his son put his arms around his father, and the dog Bart sat down politely beside them, and Ruth Calloway turned away because some things are not for watching, even when you are the woman who has earned the right to watch them. Margaret Hartley stood by the truck. She did not move. She watched her husband and her son hold each other in front of a Vermont farmhouse, 4,300 miles from the kitchen sink in Belden, where she had washed a plate 3 times in October of 1981. She did not move, but she put her hand over her mouth, and she stood very still, and she watched. The kitchen was warm. The stove was a wood stove the same as the one in the Bridge place. The same brand, the same model. Owen noticed it without meaning to, the same iron handle worn smooth. Ruth made coffee. She put 4 cups on the table. She did not sit down with them. She said, "I'll be in the barn." "Ruth, it's all right, Everett. I'll be in the barn." She put on her coat. She went out. The dog followed her. The 3 of them sat at the kitchen table. Owen, Margaret, Everett, for the first time in 13 years. The coffee steamed. Nobody touched it. His father spoke first. "Owen, yes. I'm sorry. I know. I am so. Dad, I am so sorry. Dad." His father stopped. He put his hand over his eyes. He breathed. He took his hand away. He looked at Margaret. He reached across the table. She took his hand. His hand was older than his face. His hand was the hand of a man who had spent 13 years splitting wood and feeding chickens and building fences. His hand was rough. His hand was strong. His hand was steady. Margaret's hand was small in his. His thumb moved across her knuckles. He had been doing that for 22 years. He had not done it for 13. He did it now like he had never stopped. Margie, I'm here. You're really here. I'm here, Ev. Margie, I know. Margie, I know. They sat that way for a long time. Owen looked at his coffee. Owen did not drink his coffee. Owen did not know what to do with his hands. He had not seen his parents touch each other since he was 8 years old. He had not remembered until this moment that they had ever touched each other at all. His father spoke again. His voice was thick. I never wanted to leave. I know. I want you to know that. I know, Ev. Frank Holloway. I know. He came to the rail yard. He told me what he would do. To you, to the boy. I had no choice. There was no choice that kept all three of us alive. I know. I have written you every month. I know. Eleanor. His mother nodded. She kept them all. All of them. Every one. He closed his eyes. He put his head down on the table. He did not cry either. Maybe he had spent the same 30 years learning not to. Maybe that was the thing that had drawn them together at 29 and 31 years old, in a kitchen in 1972. Two people who knew how not to cry, sitting with each other in a kitchen at 52 and 54 years old, in Vermont, in May, in 1994. His mother stood up. She went to her coat. She pulled a large envelope out of the inside pocket. She brought it back to the table. She put it down in front of Owen. Mom, open it. What is it? Open it, Owen. He opened it. Inside, a bundle, a stack of letters wrapped in faded blue ribbon. A lot of letters. He looked at his mother. How many? 151. One for every month. One for every month. Since October of 1981. He picked up the bundle. It was heavier than he expected. 13 years of monthly letters minus a handful she had read so often the paper had gone soft, and she had set them in a separate place. The ribbon was tied carefully. The corners of the envelopes were soft from handling. Mom. Yes. You read them? Yes. All of them. All of them. Why didn't you give them to me? She looked at him. Her eyes were the eyes of the woman who had walked 70 miles with a broken wrist. Because you were a child. I was 12, I was 13, I was 15. And Frank Holloway was watching the house. He was. Every week. He came by the house. He asked about you. He asked about your father. He asked if I had heard anything. He went through the mail. He went through my purse once. When I was at the bakery, I came home and the mail was on the table, and one of the corners of one of the letters was bent that hadn't been bent that morning. Mom, if I had given those letters to you, if you had carried them to school, if you had hidden them under your mattress, if you had read them out loud to yourself in your bedroom at night, he would have known. He would have known your father was still alive. He would have come for the names. He would have come for me. He would have come for you. She paused. She breathed. So I read them out loud to you every night after you fell asleep, sitting on the edge of your bed. I read every word, quietly, so no one could hear, so that they were inside you, so that you knew, even when you didn't know you knew. Owen stared at her. He stared at her for a long time. He thought of 1,000 nights of childhood when he had woken up half in the middle of the night and seen his mother sitting on the edge of his bed and thought she was just checking on him. He thought of all those nights. He thought of his mother reading his father's letters to him in a whisper while he slept. He thought of how he had hated her for not loving his father enough to cry. He thought of how wrong he had been about everything. for 13 years. He put his face in his hands. He stayed that way a long time. When he lifted his face, his mother was reaching across the table. She put her hand on his cheek. She wiped a tear off his face with her thumb. It was his tear, not hers, but she would catch her son's tears for him. She had been catching them for him for 21 years. She would catch them for the rest of her life. Owen! Mom, you're home now. Mom, you're home. He read the letters by the light of a kerosene lamp in the spare bedroom that night. He did not get past the first 10. The first letter was dated November 4th, 1981. 3 weeks after the night his father had knelt by the bed. It said, "My boy, you are 8 years old today. I am not there. I have made the worst trade of my life. I have traded these years with you for the chance that you will live to have years without me. I do not know if I made the right trade. I will not know in my lifetime. I hope you will know in yours. I am writing this from a farmhouse in Vermont. The woman who took me in is a friend of Eleanor's. Her name is Ruth. She lost her husband 2 years ago in a logging accident. She is kind. She does not ask questions I cannot answer. I want to tell you about you. I want to tell you that you came into the world reaching for someone to hold on to. I want to tell you that you found my finger and you held it for 45 minutes without letting go. I want to tell you that I have loved you from before you had a name. I want to tell you that you are not less my son for not being my blood. I want to tell you that blood is not the most important thing. I want to tell you that the most important thing is the door you choose to walk through and the chair you choose to sit in and the bed you choose to kneel beside. I chose you. I chose you the day you were born. I will choose you every day for the rest of my life, even on the days when I am not in the room with you to choose you. I will be choosing you from very far away, in a kitchen in Vermont, at a window, every morning, every night. Owen, I love you. Dad. Owen read the letter 3 times. The third time he read it out loud to the empty room. His voice cracked. He kept reading. He read the second letter. December 4th, 1981. It said, "My boy, it is Christmas next week. I want you to know." The letters went like that. 13 years of them. Owen made it to letter 10 before he had to stop. He put the bundle on the nightstand. He blew out the lamp. He lay in the dark in the spare bedroom of a farmhouse in Vermont and listened to the sound of a dog moving around downstairs and his mother and his father talking in low voices in the kitchen and the small clicking of a wood stove cooling down and the wind in the apple trees outside the window. He thought about how he had come, from a sawmill in Belden, to a hidden room in a bridge, to a clearing in a canyon, to a tin box of names, to a bridge with a quiet woman on it, to a Greyhound bus, to a kitchen in Vermont, to a stack of 151 letters in faded blue ribbon. He thought about how he had not started looking for this. He had started looking for a place that wasn't on any map. He had ended up finding a family. He slept. He did not dream. He woke before dawn because he heard a car on the gravel. Margaret was sitting up in the bed across the hall before Owen's feet hit the floor. His father was already at the bedroom door. His father had a shotgun. Owen did not ask where the shotgun had come from. His father moved through the dark house like a man who had walked this floor every night for 13 years, waiting for the sound of a car on the gravel. Owen followed him. His mother followed Owen. Ruth was already in the kitchen. Ruth had a rifle. Ruth's eyes were calm. Through the kitchen window. Headlights, a black truck. The truck stopped at the gate. The headlights went off. The driver door opened. A man got out. A big man. A man in a heavy work coat. A man wearing the smooth, heavy work boots that Owen had seen in the swale and on the bridge. He was not wearing his sheriff's star. He was not wearing a uniform. He had a rifle in his hands. Frank Holloway had crossed the country. Owen did not know how. He had not flown. They had been on the bus. He had not been on the bus. He must have driven. 3 days at the wheel, without sleeping much. A man on fire. Owen's father moved to the kitchen door. Stay back. Dad. Owen, stay back. Dad. Stay with your mother. Margaret put her hand on Everett's arm. Ev. Margie. Ev. Don't. I have to. He came for me. Let him have me. The boy, you, get out the back. Ruth's truck is parked behind the barn. Ev. Margie, please. No. Owen stepped between them. He had not decided to step. He had stepped. Dad, I'm going out. You are not. Dad. Owen. Dad, he's not here for you. He's here for the list. I have the list. I'll talk to him. Owen. Dad, I have been thinking about this for 3 days. He doesn't want to kill you. He wants the list. He has wanted the list for 5 years. He shot Eleanor by accident on the bridge. He killed her by accident. If I give him a piece of the list, the piece that doesn't include Lily, then I can buy us time until I figure out what to do. His father stared at him. His father shook his head. No. Dad, Owen Hartley, you are 21 years old. You are not going out there with that man. I am the only one who can. He doesn't know I exist as his enemy yet. He thinks I'm a boy. He thinks I am weak. I am the only one he won't shoot on sight. His father did not speak. His mother put her hand on his father's arm again. Ev. Margie. Ev, he's right. His father looked at Margaret. She held his eyes. She nodded. He's our son. Margie, he's our son, Ev. He gets to choose. His father closed his eyes. He nodded once. Owen opened the kitchen door. He stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit him. The cold was the cold of a Vermont morning before dawn. The kind of cold that makes a man feel awake all the way down to the bones. Frank Holloway was standing in the yard. The headlights of his truck were off. The sky was beginning to gray behind the eastern hills. The dog Bart was watching from the barn door. Owen walked off the porch. He stopped 20 feet from Frank Holloway. He held his empty hands at his sides. Sheriff? Boy, you came a long way. Yes, you drove. 3 days. You should be tired. I am tired. Are you going to kill me too? Frank Holloway looked at him. The rifle was at his hip. The barrel was angled at the ground. I didn't mean to kill her. I know. She turned, I turned the gun. I know. I told you on the bridge, I have shot one man in 27 years of police work. A drunk with a knife in 1969. I did not mean to shoot him either. He came at my partner and I had a half second to choose. Eleanor was different. Eleanor was wrong. I have been awake every minute since. I believe you. Boy, I am not. I know what you are. Do you? I know you came home from somewhere in 1969 or 1970 and found out your sister was married to your cousin and the cousin was beating her. And you didn't believe her. And you told her she had to stay because of the family name. And then she disappeared in 1976. And you spent 5 years thinking she was dead. And you spent 13 years after that hating my father because you decided he had killed her. Frank Holloway's hand tightened on the rifle. You don't know. I do know. You don't. I read his journal. His. My father's. Frank Holloway stood in the gray Vermont yard, and his face did something Owen had not seen it do. His face cracked. My sister. Yes, she. She's alive, Sheriff. The rifle barrel touched the ground. Frank Holloway did not lower it on purpose. His hand simply let it go down. Alive. Alive. Where? Owen looked at him. I'm not going to tell you that. Not yet. Not until. Owen did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. Because behind Frank Holloway, from the road, where the second car had come up so quietly that nobody had heard it, the car door opened, the driver got out. A woman, 53 years old, iron in her hair, eyes the same shape as the man in the yard with the rifle. Lily Bennett, born Lily Holloway, school teacher of Bangor, Maine. Sister. Margaret had made one phone call before they got off the bus in Sterling. One phone call, from a payphone in the Albany terminal. She had not told Owen who she was calling. She had not told Everett. She had not told Ruth. She had called the number written in his father's journal beside an address in Bangor. A school teacher's number. Lily Bennett. Margaret had said, "Your brother is on his way." Lily had said, "I'll come." She had driven all night. She walked across the gravel. She stopped 10 feet from her brother. He turned. He saw her. The rifle slid out of his hands. It fell on the gravel. It made a small sound. He did not look down at it. He looked at his sister. She was older than she had been in his memory. 18 years older. She was alive. Lily. Frankie. Lily. I'm sorry I didn't write. Lily. I couldn't write Frankie. They would have killed me if they knew where I was. Lily. You would have brought me back. Frankie. I didn't know. I know you didn't know. I didn't know. He broke my ribs 3 times, Frankie. He broke my jaw. He held me down by the throat and I thought I was going to die. And when I came to you that night, with the bruise on my neck, you said, I said it was God's plan for marriage. You said that. I said that. I had to leave. I know. You would not let me leave. I know. She walked past the rifle on the ground. She stopped in front of her brother. She was tall like he was. She was almost as tall as he was. She lifted her hand and touched his face. The sheriff of Belden County put his face in his sister's neck and made a sound Owen would remember for the rest of his life. It was the sound a man makes when the thing inside him that has been a stone for 18 years cracks open and is not a stone anymore. It was the sound of grief and shame and love coming out all at once. She put her arms around him. She held him. In the gray Vermont morning, in front of a red barn, in front of a kitchen window with a wood stove going inside it, in front of a porch where a thin, white-haired man stood with a shotgun he had been holding for 13 years and would not need to hold anymore, in front of a woman who had walked 70 miles with a broken wrist 22 years ago, in front of her son. Lily Bennett held her brother, and the work that had been started in 1959 in a hidden room in a railroad bridge in the Pacific Northwest, finally, reached the man it had been hurting all along. And it did not destroy him. It saved him too. Frank Holloway sat at the kitchen table that morning. Ruth Calloway poured him coffee. He drank it. He did not say much. His sister sat next to him. She held his hand. He held hers. He wept for a long time. Owen sat across the table from them. Owen watched a man become a man again. Owen watched a man who had taken Eleanor's life 2 weeks ago come undone in a Vermont kitchen and become a different man than the man who had pulled the trigger. Owen would carry that for the rest of his life. He would carry the fact that the man who killed Eleanor was a man who could be undone, a man who could be put back together different, a man who could be saved. Eleanor would have liked that. Eleanor would have known that all along. That was probably why she had walked up the mountain. She had been walking up the mountain to save Frank Holloway too. She had just not lived to finish the job. Owen would finish it for her. Frank Holloway turned himself in 2 days later. He drove back to Belden with his sister beside him in the cab of his truck. He confessed. He confessed to the shooting on the bridge. He confessed to 27 years of looking the other way when men in his county hurt their wives. He went to prison. He served 11 years. In prison, he became something he had never been. He became a man who wrote letters. He wrote one a month to his sister, to Owen, to Margaret, to Everett. His sister wrote him back. So did Owen. That was a different story. That was a longer story. That was the story of how the work continued. 2 weeks after Frank Holloway drove away from the Callaway farm, Owen's father stopped being able to climb the stairs. He had been sick for a year. He had not told Ruth. He had not told anyone. He had been waiting to see if he would live long enough. He had lived long enough. He died on a Tuesday morning in the bed in the front bedroom of the Callaway farmhouse. Margaret was on one side. Owen was on the other. Ruth was in the doorway. His last words were not to Margaret. She would not have wanted them to be. She had had 13 years of letters. She was a woman who knew when to step back. His last words were to Owen. His hand was in his son's hand. His hand was thin and cold and steady. Owen. Yes, Dad. I am not your father by blood. Dad, listen to me. I'm listening. I am not your father by blood, but I have been your father by every day for 21 years, every choice, every morning, every night. Dad, Owen, you get to choose now. What? You get to choose what you do with the work. Dad, you don't have to take it on. You can put it down. You can leave it in the ledgers. You can live a life. Dad, you can have a wife. You can have children. You can be a man who walks through this world and does not carry what your grandfather and I carried. Dad, you get to choose Owen. Dad, I am so proud of you. Dad, I have been proud of you since the day you reached up and grabbed my finger and would not let go. He closed his eyes. He breathed once more. He did not breathe again. Owen sat with his father's hand in his own for a long time. Margaret sat across from him. She put her hand on her husband's chest, right over his heart. She kept it there a long time. She had loved him for 22 years. She had only lived with him for the first 9 of them. The last 13, she had loved him at 4,300 miles. It had been enough. It had been enough. They buried Everett Hartley in the small cemetery behind the Methodist Church in Sterling, Vermont. A few people came. Ruth Callaway, the man from the feed store, the pastor, a school teacher named Lily Bennett who had come down from Maine, a woman from upstate New York who had been a girl in 1965 when Everett had driven her to the train station with a new name and a new identity in a small leather suitcase. Owen and Margaret stood at the head of the grave. Margaret had a single thing in her hand. She put it on the casket. It was a brass key. Eleanor had given Owen the same key. Margaret had been carrying its twin in her purse for 22 years. She had never told anyone she had it. She had never used it. She just put it on the casket. She nodded. She stepped back. Margaret stayed in Vermont through the summer. She helped Ruth with the chickens. She helped Ruth with the wood. She helped Ruth with the apple trees in the orchard. The 2 women drank coffee together in the morning and read books together in the evening, and they did not talk much about the men they had loved and lost. They did not need to. Owen left in July. He had work to do. The ledgers had 247 names. 212 of them were still in the addresses listed. Owen had checked, quietly, from payphones in Albany and Burlington and Concord. Of the others, some had moved, some had remarried, some had passed, some had to be found. Owen spent the summer driving a borrowed truck across the country. He spent it writing letters and making phone calls and showing up on porches and saying, "You don't know me, but my grandfather knew you. You are safe. You are still safe. Nothing has changed. You don't have to do anything. I just wanted you to know that somebody is still watching the line. 212 women heard from someone for the first time in years, for some of them in decades, that someone was still watching. Owen Hartley delivered the news. By August, he was tired. By September, he was somebody who knew what his life was for. The next October, when the leaves started turning, Owen came home. Not to Belden, not to Sterling, to the canyon, to the bridge. He came alone first. He came at sunrise. He climbed the trail his grandfather had cut. He stood on the western end of the bridge. He looked across. The bridge had aged a year. The bridge had aged a year well. The hatch was still where his grandfather had set it. The room below was still the room. The cans were still on the shelves. The candles were still in their jars. The river still breathed in the stone. He spent the morning checking on things. He cleaned the stove. He swept the floor. He repacked a spot on the river wall where moisture had crept through. He replaced a candle stub with a new one. He carved something into the inside of the door. He had been thinking about it for the whole drive across the country. He had been thinking about what he wanted to put there. He took out his knife. He carved. Built by William. Kept by Everett. Continued by Owen. With love. Always. He read it 3 times after he finished. He nodded. He closed the door. He climbed up. He came out onto the bridge. A truck was at the western end of the bridge. 2 women got out. His mother, Ruth Calloway. Margaret had aged a year well, too. She was smaller than she had been. She was steadier than she had been. She walked across the bridge to her son. She had a basket. Ruth had a basket. Both baskets had seeds in them. The seeds Owen's father had labeled in 1959 and 1962, in 1968, and every year after. Owen's mother had taken them out of the tin box. She had brought them home. The 3 of them went down the eastern trail. They went to the clearing. They went to the cache shed. They planted seeds in the raised beds where Owen's grandfather had planted seeds in 1959. They planted seeds in the raised beds where his father had planted seeds in 1972. They worked all afternoon. They did not say much. They did not need to. When the light started to fail, they walked back up to the bridge. They stood on it together, 3 of them, Margaret, Owen, Ruth. The river was gold below them. The sun was setting behind the western rim. The fog was coming up from the canyon the way it always came up at sunset in October. Margaret put her arm around her son. She had not held him like this since he was 8. She had been holding him for a year and a half now. She would hold him for the rest of her life. Owen, yes, Mom. What are you going to do? He thought about it. He thought about it a long time. He thought about his father in the bed 2 weeks before he died saying, "You get to choose." He thought about the 212 women he had visited. He thought about the next woman who would walk 70 miles with a broken wrist in some valley somewhere because her husband would not stop. He thought about Eleanor Whitfield. He thought about a small woman who had come up a mountain at her age before dawn because someone had to. He thought about Helen at the bakery in Belden who had given him bread heels for free when he was hungry. He thought about every woman who had touched his face at Eleanor's grave. He looked at his mother. He looked at Ruth. He looked at the river. He looked at the bridge his grandfather had built. He said, "I think I'll keep watching the line, Mom." She nodded. She did not smile. She just nodded. She put her head against her son's shoulder. The sun went down. The canyon went purple and then blue and then black. The first stars came up. The river kept breathing in the stone. Below them, in the room, in the dark, the candles waited. The seeds in the box waited. The brass key waited. The work continues. The work continues. The work continues.